Welcome to the Nick Taylor Horror Show. Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff Jr. are former apprentices of the legendary Stan Winston, and for the past 30 years, their company, Amalgamated Dynamics, has been at the forefront of some of the most epic and large-scale practical effects in Hollywood. From the Graboids from Tremors to the aliens and predators and even the dinosaurs from Jurassic World, Tom and Alec have been behind them all, and through the process have built one of the most prolific practical effects studios in history. Despite their extensive accomplishments and indelible name in the industry, Alec and Tom still face the challenges that come with being a practical effects studio in CGI-driven Hollywood. Condensed timelines, lower budgets, unrealistic expectations, and the ever-present competition with digital are just a few of the challenges that come with doing what they do. But regardless, Tom and Alec continue to fight the good fight for practical effects. We dive into the challenges and splendor of practical effects and learn more about ADI's creative processes behind creating some of the most iconic creatures in cinematic history. All of this and so much more on today's episode of the Nick Taylor Horror Show. Now, for your listening pleasure, here are Tom Woodruff Jr. and Alec Gillis of Amalgamated Dynamics. Pardon my incompetence there.
It was the fucking foul language that I objected to.
Terribly sorry to have offended.
Of course not.
So you guys are busy guys nowadays.
Yeah, we are.
Between Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and the latest Predator movie, and the upcoming, which I hadn't even heard of until today, Godzilla versus King Kong.
You didn't see that coming?
I didn't see that one coming.
Really?
That was a curveball.
Yeah.
That was a real curveball, yeah.
I think that was the whole reason they did Godzilla to start with, just so they could team him up and put him up against Kong.
They can do like an Avengers style kind of...
That's what they're headed for.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing it, right? It's working. Everybody seems to love it. I think it's kind of an offshoot of a binge watching, where you want as much material as you can about these characters you've decided to accept into your lives.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Seriously?
Sorry?
Seriously?
On some level, I think.
All right. Good night, everybody.
So when you are approaching these iconic, heavily established IPs like Godzilla, like the Predator, how do you approach taking those established characters to the next level visually? How do you keep a foot in the established design while keeping something new and exciting with every iteration and every new movie?
A lot of our job in designing within these franchises is to present options to the director. So we really like to kind of bracket the design where if it's whatever the character is, not necessarily Godzilla, but or a Predator or whatever, we'll design things that are just so far out of left field and crazy that we're pretty sure they're going to be passed on, right? They're not going to make the grade, but we'll also then do something that's just a 5% change. And then somewhere within that range, you start to get a feel for what the director's looking for. And then you land on, the changes that are appropriate to that particular director. It doesn't mean that, it's not what the fans would want but we are big on, serving the director, who is the guardian of the story, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where we differ. I got a question recently on social media. Why does the fugitive Predator in Shane Black's The Predator look so much like the original Predator? And my answer is because that's what Shane wanted, and we do I think we do a good job making directors happy.
Got it. So it's a matter of taking something to such an extreme initially so that the director always kind of reels it back, but you always present an option. It's kind of like...
We present... one way of looking at it is we present a really boring option and we present a super crazy out of left field option and then a bunch of things in between.
Got it.
And then you find out where you lay. It's the bowl of porridge, right? It's the Goldilocks bowl of porridge.
Right. Well, another thing to mention is congratulations on 30 years. It's pretty,
yes, thanks.
Pretty extraordinary.
Thank you. Yeah.
So for those who haven't heard the story, I mean, obviously you guys were both working under Stan Winston. How did you decide to split off and create your own company, and what was the kind of origin story behind ADI?
Well, I think that the timing was such that it was not about splitting off from Stan Winston and creating ADI, the creature effect shop, but it was about leaving Stan and moving. We both had this passion to be directors, filmmakers, writers, directors, and we had this little project we had done, and it was starting to get enough interest that people were actually setting some meetings up for us. So we saw that coming, and that was where we were sort of charting our trajectory anyway. So it's kind of hard to go to Stan Winston and say, we want to go off and pursue this. And it's not like you don't jump off of the coattails of Stan Winston and then jump onto somebody else's coattails. There were no better coattails to be riding on.
Right.
So it wasn't the goal to go off and create an entity that was there to try to duplicate or compete with what he was doing. It was literally somebody might be interested in us as filmmakers, and we have to give this our total attention.
So what happened to that project, Tom? It sounds like things didn't go exactly the way you planned.
Well, here we sit, 30 years later, and I've got to pitch this story.
No, it was a fun script that we wrote and we did a short film. Actually, Tom and I worked on the original Predator, but we did not go to set. And when everybody cleared off to go to Mexico to shoot the Predator, Tom and I stood there and waved, bye, good luck. And then we immediately started building sets in the empty shop to shoot our movie at Stan's place, and because we needed to have it wrapped up by the time they all got back. So we shot the short film, we had a script, and Gail Ann Hurd was interested in it.
Wow.
And we thought, this is great, and we'll bring this to Stan. It can be a Stan Winston studio picture, right? And it was an anthology, so Tom will direct one, I'll direct one, Stan will direct one. And Stan was pursuing so many of his own projects that he was working on, labor of love type, passion projects, that I think that he was not able to kind of clutter his plate with our desires and our passion. So we came to a point where we were like, Stan has like 6 guys on payroll that he won't let go because he's loyal. We were, guys that started on Terminator like Tom did. I came in a little later, but we had done, Aliens and Monster Squad and Leviathan and all that stuff. And Stan was very loyal. And we thought, maybe now's the time for us to step out and get this movie made. And then it didn't get made. And that was kind of a good early lesson that, you think that things are just going to line up that easy, and they don't. And then there was some months went by, and we started to say, we're not going to, we can't go back to Stan. That's not cool. That won't feel right. And anyway, we started doing some jobs, did a few little jobs, not even as a company, right?
Yeah, just working as Tom and Alec.
Yeah.
You remember and love them from Stan Winston Studios.
Yeah.
And then we decided we should start a company. We were working off of the generosity of people like Rick Lazzarini, who let us work out of his shop because we didn't have a place to work, and then K&B let us start Tremors out of their shop.
Oh wow!
We were a company by then, but we didn't have a place to work. So there was a lot of support.
A lot of support, and it was great because we started out with those guys. Lazzarini worked for Stan, Howard and Greg worked for Stan as well. Howard was on Pumpkinhead.
Howard was on Pumpkinhead. I have great memories of him on Pumpkinhead.
Yeah, I think Greg was there too, wasn't he? I can't really remember, but they're like, you use some, pay us what you can, and here's some shop space. And we're like, great, we'll put you guys on payroll. And they were sculpting Tremors worms with us, So it was a good time, and we always kind of carried that with us. That there's a lot of people that help you along the way, and we're appreciative of that.
Well, I love that idea, and it speaks to what we were talking about before, about this notion in the community about a rising tide raises all ships.
Exactly right.
Sounds like practical special effects makers. You guys were all helping each other out.
Well, because we all had the same kind of background. We were all about the same age. We all loved the same movies. We all saw the same things as kids that inspired us to become this. So I think there was stronger camaraderie then than there is now, and I think for no dire reason other than we've been in this mode for so long. It's just
we have our kind of we have our companies and we have our little bubbles that we exist in, right? And we're friends with all these guys, with Mike Elizalde from Spectral, and Shane and John from Legacy, and Howard and Greg from K&B. And we do get together with them on occasion. It's always a blast. You go out and you have martinis like real grown-ups, and talk about old times and all that stuff. And that kind of reinforces the bonds. There have been times where as a group, we have been competitive. In fact, some people, not within that group, but there have been some kind of ugly competitive stuff back in the 80s and 90s that we always tried to stay out of that kind of stuff, because you just have to hope for that there's enough work to go around, and at some point it's going to come back to you. You're going to need to borrow somebody's Hobart to mixing machine to make more foam latex, or a bigger oven or whatever. So it is best to kind of bond together. And now that we have so much runaway production, chasing tax incentives, and CGI kind of squeezing in on us and doing what we used to do, it gives you a fonder feeling towards all those guys that you started out with.
Yeah. So there was a real magic time period for practical special effects. And do you feel like that story has been properly told during the time when Savini and K&B and you guys and Steve Johnson were all just making movie magic, and there was a friendly competition? Right. Do you feel like that story has been properly told, either in a book or documentary?
I think it maybe not in one contained single source, but I think I've seen some pretty good accurate coverage. The only thing I find that I see, because you mentioned the 70s as well, and I think that's important. I don't think the memories of all the creature effects movies of the 80s are really complete without sort of looking even behind those, because I remember towards the mid to late 70s, and I grew up back east, and we'd go to see drive-in movies, and there were some great movies that just they weren't brilliant, right? They weren't masterpieces, but they were very much beloved. And I'm thinking of things like John Chambers in the Planet of the Apes movies, even those the terrible ending sequels. I still loved them. I call them terrible. I loved them. Right. But other movies like The Island of Dr. Moreau and Food of the Gods, and like this, what was it? That whole chain of low budget creature movies that were all
like
practical.
The Corman ones.
Yeah. Well, the Corman movies, certainly. I'm trying to think of who the guy was behind like Food of the Gods and
what was it? Night of the Lepus and Stuff the Giant Rabbits and things like that. Fun
stuff from the 70s.
You know what? I haven't read Steve's book, and I don't have a copy of it, and I don't know where to get a copy. I just wish someone would give me a free copy. But I was talking to Stephen Norrington, who directed Blade and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and he worked with Steve back on Greystoke. He was an animatronics guy, and so he's a buddy of ours. Steve uses ADI as a workplace because he's working on a bunch of crazy projects of his own. But he said of Steve's book, he said, this would make a fantastic movie. And I don't know, but from Steve's description, it's like it could be a Cameron Crowe kind of crazy, or what was that one that Sam Rockwell directed that was about the guy from The Gong Show?
Yeah,
George Barris.
Oh, and he was in it too, right? Sam Rockwell was in it.
Sam Rockwell was in it, I believe. Yeah.
And he's
George Clooney. Chuck Barris.
Right.
George Clooney directed Sam Rockwell.
It wasn't Making of a Murderer, but it's something like that.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was, but it was a fun movie.
Confessions of
a hitman or a assassin or something.
Right.
Anyway. But yeah, it was. I just don't know if the reach is there enough of an audience of people who would be like, oh my God, look, now we're on the set of Dawn of the Dead or something.
I think so.
You would have to think when you consider maybe it's not theatrical, but when you look at all the download, all the streaming, there's such a wide range of material and such sharp, high end like this thing that my wife and I started watching with the magnificent Mrs. Maisel, right? Or the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and it's about this woman who in the late 50s who's embarking on a stand-up comedy career just sort of on a fluke. And I'm thinking, you see sitting around in an office going, how many fans are there of women stand-up comedians from the late 50s? And it's just loaded with details and which gives it a real poignant reality.
Well, now you have guys like Tarantino who who grew up, as fans of all those guys, of Savini and Romero and all that kind of stuff. So maybe they find a way to make this story, to warrant a $25 million, $30 million movie.
I think it could be a show. It could be like a Mad Men style show about when rubber ruled the 80s and 90s. I think that would be super duper cool. Yeah, because I think the kids nowadays are realizing that practical special effects during that heyday were magical in ways that they're just not right now.
Yeah.
Where do you guys arrive at that whole integration between practical and CGI? Guillermo del Toro seems to be a big proponent of doing as much practical as possible, but kind of integrating practical with CGI in the most effective ways.
We find that particularly recently, and I say recently in the last 15 or 20 years, is that most of the digital guys we work with say, please do as much of this as a practical effect on set as you can. And the director says, do as much of this as a practical effect as you can. And where the sticking point becomes is, I think, at a production level where a production company or studio is putting so much money into a film that to safeguard that look, to have some continuity to that look, right? Marvel movies have a very specific look.
Right.
It's not like you walked out your front door and just took a picture of a world, and it's a beautiful world. It's very artistic. It's a very beautifully art-directed vision, but it's very consistent, and it's consistent because it can be controlled to such a degree because there are so many elements that are combined digitally. But for us, and as far as our practical work, we find that if we can count on digital work to support us, and for us to support them, that's always much better than the competition of feeling like it's just, well, we'll throw a few $1 million to digital and see what they come up with a concept, and we'll throw a few $100 to the practical and see what they come up with a concept. It's an unfair bargain for us to be able to try to compete at that level.
Right. And you mentioned Del Toro as a proponent of the mixed approach, and he is one of the rare directors that has the clout to impose that upon a studio, because the studio doesn't necessarily want to go practical. We spoke to a few years ago, 5, 6 years ago, a gentleman by the name of John Swallow, who was the head of production at Universal. And we just point blank asked him, because he's a straight shooter, a great guy. We said, John, why do things go digital at this studio at Universal or at his studio? He said, guys, because I don't want to pay for it twice. He says, in my experience, if you imagine Wilford Brimley, that's how I don't want to pay for the fucking thing twice.
Right.
He said that because what happens is directors change their minds, and in test screenings, and people just start, they decide that, oops, we made a mistake, and so we're going to have to replace this now. So then he's paid for it as a practical up front, which then people change their minds, and the only option you have at that late hour is digital. And then you put a big demand on the digital artists, and they have nervous breakdowns because they got to do something in 2 months that should take 6 months or 8 months. And so these are the kind of the forces. But a guy like and he said, Del Toro is the only guy I trust.
Wow.
Del Toro will tell me, I want to have big wings on this thing, and they're going to be practical. And I believe that they will stay practical. And I think what's missing from that equation is that what he's not taking into account is that pre-production times have shrunk. Like when we worked on Aliens, we had probably 9 months of pre-production time. That used to be a matter of course. You would take 9 months to prep and build a movie, and also refine the script during that time. At some point, I've heard people credit it to Disney when they said, hey, wait a minute, we're taking out a big loan on this movie from our line of credit. 9 months in advance, we're paying interest on that. What if we just do that for 3 months? And we prep for 3 months. So you're prepping these huge movies in 3 months. And then no wonder by the time you start shooting, the script isn't ready. Nothing's really quite fully baked. And then it's in test screenings. And when the movie comes together, you discover what's wrong with the movie. And then you scramble around reshooting and trying to fix it. And that's an economic thing that has nothing to do with, gee, we fans love the tactile quality of practical effects. That has nothing to do with it. The digital work, the digital model is what supports the studio's decisions to truncate the pre-production schedules.
There's also an element of of a financial sort of self-fulfilling prophecy too, where there are some projects where we will bid on, we'll be given a script, we'll do a breakdown, we'll say, oh, this could be the practical, this. Here's something that could be a practical and digital combination. Here's something that's a little beyond this. And what will happen is then a production producer or production company will look at it and say, you know what, yes, we can use this and this and this, but wow, these prices are pretty high because there hasn't been $1 spent yet on this movie. So guys, what can you do? How can you give me all of this but give it to me for less? And you go back and forth, and suddenly you have a much smaller percentage of what you want to not just build something, but design and prototype. We're always going to the set now with prototypes, and that wasn't always the case. When we had these beautiful build schedules, we would design, build, and prototype something and work out the kinks and then rebuild what had to be rebuilt. So now we're not doing that. So we go to set with things that aren't 100%, and a director who isn't involved in the decision to cut the cost is now wondering, well, why can't this thing spit fire, right? So that becomes a little bit of an element where you kind of get painted into a corner, and it becomes sort of a black mark against practical because there's nobody that's there telling the studio and everybody on set exactly why it is what it is.
And in the mix of all of that, practical effects get completely axed. Well, it sounds like it's incumbent upon directors to insist on a practical approach. It's all in their hands.
We would love that, but that's not the case. Very few directors can stand up to a studio. Very few of them can stand up. Or if they can stand up, they go, I got to pick my battles. Right. What do I want? Do I want the actor of my choice, or do I want an extra 10 days of shooting? 'Cause that may not be a related cost to practical. Or am I insisting on having puppets on film, on set, And then add to that tax incentives. A lot of movies are shot in tax incentive places. So if you can go to Louisiana, or you can go to Europe somewhere where you get back 30 cents on the dollar, 40 cents on the dollar for every dollar you spend in that country, spending it in Los Angeles in an animatronics studio is literally what we've been called a bad spend. You're a bad spend. So you guys are lucky to be on this show because you're a bad spend. Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to Romania and get sophisticated animatronics? No, we're going to go to Romania and get digital work because we can get digital work done in Romania or India or wherever. And from a I don't mean to sound like it's just a complaint, right? But these are the things that once you understand, it's the economics of this. Once you talk to enough producers, or you have friends that are, producers or line producers or what have you, they go, no, let me explain something to you. It's not about quality. It's not about what the director wants. It's about how do we make this movie? How do we get this movie from not being greenlit to the next stage, which is greenlit, to the next stage, which is going into production. And a lot of it are just working off of assumptions. We will shoot in a tax incentive place. We will use a tax incentive digital. We will not have SAG puppeteers on set because that takes money out of the back end when we have to pay residuals. So there's a lot of moving parts that a producer who has no particular allegiance to a technique will plug in to get the movie made. And that's just the reality of it. And I find it kind of now understanding a lot of the stuff, it's kind of liberating to me because I don't take it personally anymore. Like I used to think, well, why didn't that director choose this or stick up for us on that? Because it's not the director's call. It's too much to expect a director is going to power through that these days. Right. It didn't used to be, because you can point, well, what about Cameron? What about Spielberg? Yes, in the 70s, 80s, those were guys that were building their careers, and people would go, yeah, whatever you want. Or there was no digital back then, So people are just doing what they need to do to get these ever more expensive movies made, and they're more and more expensive for a variety of reasons. But it kind of frees you up from, we have to explain this sometimes to younger people who work for us. Don't be upset if the movie doesn't turn out how you like, or if your work isn't, or if you don't get credit. Because the studio will come back to us. We negotiate. How many credits do you get, right?
Right.
How do all those names end up on the screen? Well, a studio lawyer negotiates with every company or every individual or the union, right? how many names you get on there. Why do they care? Because they don't want a running time that is so long that they can't do X number of shows per day. So they squeeze them all down. It's like the extreme example of that is on TV, where they just start, they have a union contract that says you got to show these, even on TV, you got to show your credits. Okay, we're going to move them past in such a freaking blur you won't be able to read them. And then we're going to shrink them down to picture-in-picture. Ha, 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 this is how we get around that, right? We'll start the commercials while your stupid credits are rolling. And so that's, these are all things that are economics based, and they're not, it's business,
Right.
It's Chinatown, Jake. It's business, right? You just have to accept it and work within that system, or try to create your own system, which is what we've done in making our own little movies.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine to we can disagree with something, but doesn't mean we don't. It's not like we're disagreeing with it because we don't understand it.
Right.
We can disagree and still understand it. It makes perfect sense because it is about. We'd much rather see more movies coming out. We'd much rather see more movies getting shown each day, because the more it's like everybody floats at the same level. So you get more movies, you get more product out there, you get people more choices. It brings more work.
And we're not endorsing that, but we understand it. And I don't know, like we as guys who run a studio, we are kind of like both artist and business people, and we understand the pains of both, because we're squeezed all the time. How are we going to get this thing done? If we want this job, we ask for 12 weeks, we get 6. We ask for X amount, we get Y. How do you make it work? Well, to stay in business for 30 years, you got to make some real painful decisions. Otherwise, you're throwing up your hands and you're going, this industry sucks and stupid and I'm out of it, man. Or you go, how do we make this work? How do we? And part of the reason we make it work is because we still love what we do, and we love seeing what our artists bring to it. There's so many phenomenally talented sculptors, painters, mold makers, seamstresses, feather workers, fur workers. It's a fantastic creative bunch of people who we really love having around. And in part, it's not just for us, but it's for us. But also, it's to keep this creative community alive. And I think every shop owner, I would think, would agree that you feel a sense of responsibility to your people. So you gotta bend, and you gotta figure out the ways to keep the work coming in.
You have to keep the work coming because they're all LA people. So again, and as much as they call it a bad spend, that pertains to everybody that we work with in LA. So the best we can do is to be flexible in our negotiations and find a way to bring the cost in to offset what they're seeing, in their tax incentives, and it becomes a very, very difficult thing because we're still passionate about the work. We have to be passionate about the work with the understanding of how the work works in the business, but it makes it so difficult when all you want to do is bring work to people. And I guess the saving grace is because they are all LA and they are all freelance for the most part, right? So people say, I need a job. Have you got work going on? And the answer sometimes is, you know what, we're bidding on something, so if we don't get the work, relax. I'm sure you'll be working on this movie. It just won't be here. It'll be somewhere else.
And there have been times where we haven't gotten a show, but we know it goes over to another studio, and we'll make a phone call on behalf of some artists. Say, hey, we know you have your own stock of people, but these guys are now available. So consider them. They're guys and gals that they're great, and you ideally want to place them somewhere so that they're still in the business when you need them. Right. And that's also why things like Monsterpalooza are great, social media and Instagram, Etsy, all that kind of stuff, so that artists can have income separate from the movies, so that they can pay their bills and be here and in the game when ADI calls or when Spectral or Legacy calls. And for that reason, we let our artists, our key artists, not everybody, we just don't have enough space, but we let our key artists use shop space at ADI to create their own personal projects. Cool. Adam Doherty is a great, very entrepreneurial guy, Creature Kid, on Instagram, and he has done some great little sculptures and manufactures and mass-produces lines of mass-produces. They're still limited edition, and sells them. And so he's got tablesfuls of like little, weird creature characters and stuff like that. Cool. And it's great because he's doing it. He's out there engaging in the market system in order to stay alive. He's not moping and wishing someone would wave the magic wand at him. That's a tough thing for an artist. Is you put all this time into getting good at your craft, and that's what you want to do. That's where you're passionate. But then there's this whole other thing called business that you have to acknowledge is out there, and you have to engage in that system. And the irony of it is that I always tell this to like people who go to art school and all that, is that you're an artist. You got into art to make a statement and make people think and move people and speak truth to power and all that. And the irony is you got to be the best capitalist out there. You have to be a better capitalist than somebody with a normal job.
Yeah.
Because you have to promote yourself and you have to understand how your market works. And that should be part of art school training.
Yeah.
Not, keeping books and balancing a checkbook and all that, but also how do you self-promote? How do you get out there in a new age where those tools are available to you? And I think if artists could let go of this idea that you have to starve or be tortured in order to be an effective artist, then you might actually be able to create more art, and an actual lifetime of art, as opposed to being a burnout or whatever. I mean, whatever. I don't mean to judge people who do legitimately have problems and work them out in their artwork. That's a wonderful thing for those people. But and thank God they have their art. But it's not a requirement.
Right. Well, I feel like that's a huge point. I mean, what advice do you have for these kind of up-and-coming, starry-eyed artists who want to get into practical special effects but need to know the business end? What are some of the skills that you think that they should consider learning in addition to their craft to just get themselves ready for what lies ahead as far as Hollywood and business decisions and all that?
Well, I think a good amount of that was what Alec has just mentioned, right? To be aware of what you need to do to kind of stand on your own and know that there are going to be plenty of times where there isn't going to be an effects house that particularly has a job that can make use of your particular skills. You can expand your skills. When we were I remember working. My very first job was working on some low budget Charlie Band picture through Makeup Effects Labs, and I went in there. I had a book of stuff that I had done on my own, and they hired me, and I learned things on the job. But I was, I started literally sweeping floors, and then I was making molds, and then I was sculpting, and then I was doing makeup designs, and I was creating foam runs, and then I was painting appliances, and then I'm gluing things on set. So and puppeteering. So in that one film, it was like boot camp for all of those things. But they made me much more of an attractive prospect to the next job that I had to move up into.
Because you had all these skills now.
Because I had skills. So and back then things weren't so segmented into areas of production like a production line. And we are that today. We have guys that are strictly sculptors, guys that are strictly mold makers, and part of that is just because, again, we don't have a lot of time to invest because we don't have a lot of time to build. So we want people who are recognized. But I think if people can be aware that there's a lot that is on their shoulders, it's a big decision because these effects houses, unlike the films, the practical effects houses are here in LA. They're not in Louisiana, and they're not in Vancouver as much as, right? So the work has to happen here. So you have to be kind of cost effective, and you have to be willing to once the show is over, if there's not another show for you, you have to hit the streets, and you have to more importantly keep an open dialogue with the different shops and the different places where you hope to be hired, or different people that can help speak to your talents to somebody that's unfamiliar with you.
So networking is really important.
Networking and a lot of self-motivation. If you're not working, you shouldn't be laying on a couch watching TV at 11 o'clock in the morning. You should be out doing things, finding ways to support yourself, like Alec mentioned, Adam Doherty, or improving your skills, or creating another mask or another makeup or another piece of art that goes into your portfolio to show how you're growing as an artist.
Yeah. That's when we look at portfolios, we say, don't show me something you did for a big movie. Show me your personal artwork, because that's interesting. That shows us who you are and what your angle is, what you love, and where your inspiration is. I don't mean to say don't show me anything from a big movie, because you want to know that the person has chops.
Right.
But the good thing is that a lot of young people who have not really had any professional experience, they're a little sheepish about showing personal projects, and to us, that is really what is the most interesting. That's what's coming out of your brain and out of your fingertips, and that shows what you're into and who you are. The hardest thing for me about advice to young people now is like knowing what the landscape is, because now 30 years down the line of having a studio, we know what our challenges are, but I don't really know what the challenges are to a young person trying to break in. I know that if I'm not working, I look around. If I'm not working, and if a couple of other shops aren't working, then all you've got is your own resources, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, as Tom said, improving your own skills, and then branding yourself through social media and coming up with an angle of what you're doing. I think of some of the things I see on Instagram, and I get very hopeful for younger artists. Like there's one, I'm going to blank on her name. She does miniature stuff, and it's all like little miniature houses and it's great stuff. I think she's worked for Leica, and she's done stuff, but she's also selling, very much like Creature Kid, right? Alan Doherty. They're selling things, and they're presenting their stuff with nicely photographed images and little movie vignettes and clever stuff, and they have taught themselves to speak well, on camera and promote themselves as artists. And I don't know if she's selling stuff, but it's pretty cool. And she's not unique. There are people who are doing artwork, and they're at least getting them out there, and that's what you got to do. You got to be self-reliant, or if you can find a job at if all that stuff scares you, and if you can find a job at an amusement park, if you can find, like a development, play company, or if you can find work with a haunted house attraction or whatever,
or mask, right? There's different masks. These big mask companies. So you have these artists like Mikey Ratz and Wayne Anderson and
is Distortions Unlimited still going out in Colorado?
Well, they self promote exactly the same way. They're online. They self promote. They go to the mask shows. They have great things. They're always turning out new, amazing collectible masks, and there's a market for them, so they can keep themselves afloat. Because Los Angeles is a very expensive place to live, and that's another thing that's kind of a bad hand that is dealt to you.
And Monsterpalooza is full of very talented people. I guess it would be daunting if you're just starting out and you're new and you're like, I want to work doing practical effects, and you walk through a place like Monsterpalooza, and there's some folks from Kentucky or something that have monsters and Halloween stuff, and they're just like great looking stuff, and you're wondering, how the hell do you compete with that? What do you have to do to be noticed and to be? And then there's another aspect of this, which is that a day job is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not, right? Like working at a Starbucks or doing whatever, like that guy who was bagging groceries that everybody made a big thing about, right? He was an actor from The Cosby Show, and he was caught working a day job, just bagging groceries. There's pride to be taken in that, because that is you're a creative person, and you got to pay your bills. He takes paying his bills seriously. He's not moping around doing nothing or whatever. So you got to keep yourself busy, and there is a case to be made for saying, okay, I don't really have the will or the drive to put everything on the line and go to LA and traipse around and try to build myself a career. I really don't want to do that. There are other things I want in life. I want to be able to, buy a house sooner, or, whatever you may want to do, all those mundane things that people, that's what builds a life, right? So some people will have those day jobs, and they will do wonderful, fantastic things on the side. Yeah. Craig Sturtz is a guy who we put him in Harbinger Down. He was a pledger. He's a doctor and a talented doctor, but he does these amazing paintings, wildlife paintings. He sculpts. He came in and he did some appliances for us on Wellwood. Just said, I want to contribute. Do you have any appliance needs? Yeah, we need a broken pinky. We need a chemo port. You'd be perfect for that, doc. And he sends us a box full of beautiful silicone appliances that he's taught himself how to make. And so you can't. It is perfectly acceptable to not risk everything and pursue something, and you have to anyway. Even if you are working in the industry, it's so up and down. You have to have sidelines and other income streams and all that stuff.
So you mentioned Harbinger Down. I would love to talk about it. I think a lot of people have probably already read about the whole Thing debacle, and I'm not going to make you relive that. But it sounds like Harbinger Down was the product of that, having built all these beautiful practical special effects.
There were a number of things that came out of that our Thing 2011 experience. Where you hit the. We saw it coming really before other people did, but we're team players, so we want the movie to do well. And we waited for it to come and go. I think it was even after it went on to VOD, and then we decided, we're getting a lot of questions. What did you guys do? Did you guys screw up? How come this, that? So rather than get into any commentary on why things happened as we did, we just put up a video on our channel that showed what we did, and it got a tremendous reaction. And the upside is it kind of pulled us out of a funk, because we were looking at Rick Baker had stuff cut from his Men in Black movies, from the Wolfman also. I'd love to see that video of transformations and stuff, because they built stuff and tested it, I assume. And it's happening to everybody. It's happening to Stan Winston. So no one's immune, and it isn't about the quality of the work. It's other forces that we can't control. So it was nice to get that positive feedback, and then we thought, well, maybe there's something we can tap into with asking people to support the art via crowdfunding, right? And that brought us a portion of the money. And then Sultan Al-Darmaki from Dark Dunes, who's a big fan of effects and has gone on to do puppet movies like Kids vs. Monsters, and he's got Yamasong as a full, complete rod puppet movie with digital compositing and all that kind of stuff. And so he's a big supporter of creature and practical effects. He brought more money into it that elevated the film. And then it was just, what we said was we're going to do an homage to the original Thing and to Alien, right? So it's going to be an 80s feel to it. We're going to not necessarily set it in the 80s and not do a parody either or a spoof. Right. There's always kind of a snarkiness to parodies. I think that where you kind of feel like the filmmakers feel like they are better than the genre that they're spoofing, and that's rarely true, So that's what the idea behind Harbinger was. It's going to be like comfort food, and we are not going to use any digital creature effects in it. We're going to use digital as a support tool, which is what we would like to see more of: rig removal, wire removal, compositing, and there was a creature that we put digital blinks onto. But that was the extent of it. There's no 3D digital animation. There's model work and miniatures and all that. Even to the point where, again, mentioning Steve Norrington, he did a bunch of great digital stuff for us. And there was one transformation scene where he said, I want you to see, here's the shot with your practical elements composited on Matt Winston's back. Look at this. Now, here's what I did in 3D digital animation. And in that case, his 3D CGI looked better than the practical version. And that was a painful decision. I had to say, no, I can't use your higher quality work in this film because that's not the promise. Right. So we put it out there. And it's interesting because a lot of the people who were part of the Kickstarter, and I think we had 3,066 people pledging, and I think we got we only really had about, I don't know, we had a handful of people who were upset with delivery of T-shirts and things like that, and it's a very difficult thing to stay on top of and to do it in a timely fashion of people's expectations. You become Amazon.com, and they think that there's a staff of people working, and no, there isn't. There's my daughter, right? That's who's doing this, and in most cases, some of the things were just simple misunderstandings, like people would change their addresses because it's a year. It takes a year to fulfill all this stuff because we're also making a movie, and and then people would get very reasonable, go, oh, I'm sorry, here's my new address, my new mailing address, or my new email address, or whatever, and we'd rectify it. But we had a very high success rate of satisfaction with the Kickstarter itself. With the movie, it was interesting because I think that we originally, it was for that community, right, just for a small community of people that I thought they'll get this, they'll see that we are it's a mashup, right? And as I said, it's like comfort food. But because the movie was good enough that it got a wider release, it got a worldwide release. It went theatrical all over the world. It went to VOD all over the world and all the various territories. People who were not aware of whatever it was, they're just seeing a trailer like, oh, what's this? Huh. Some people would say, you read in the comments, bullshit, looks like the thing on the boat, looks like the thing on a boat. And then the very next comment is, awesome, looks like the thing on a boat. Or one thing, this looks like some 80s movie. Sucks. And then somebody else says, it's like an 80s movie. Fantastic. So I felt good about the target audience that it was made for, but I can understand why people would look at it and go, huh? Why are you ripping off Carpenter? Or whatever. I'm sure that's how they talk too. I bet they do. I bet they're mouth breathers. No, hey, whatever. It's all about opinion. Anybody can have any opinion they want about anything, and that's okay. But I felt like it did connect with the people that it was intended to connect.
Cool. And what is Wellwood? You'd mentioned that before. What's Wellwood all about?
Tom, I can't keep talking.
Alec needs a break.
I haven't had enough peanuts.
Well,
go ahead, Tom.
Well, it's another Studio ADI project, and even less. I was even less connected with Wellwood than I was with Harbinger Down. While we were producing Harbinger Down, I was off directing Fire City, which was another low budget Kickstarter movie, but written by a writer-producer team. These two guys that took a chance on me and turned out, I thought, very well and got some great reviews, got some bad reviews. Like Alex said, everybody has different opinions. But with Wellwood, we were both executive producers. So that meant that we made what we could available in terms of allowing some scenes to be shot at ADI. Mm-hmm. Alec took on most of the work of doing the creature effects, right? Just that labor of love, passion, because there are certain things that at this level of film that he was able to experiment with, like clear vacuform pieces and 3D printing for molds and quick and dirty ways of getting a great looking thing. Things that a big studio picture would not allow you to take a chance on, right? So it was a chance, an opportunity to develop further techniques of like employing more modern techniques like 3D modeling and digital printing and test them in a very safe environment, which is a small, low-budget film.
That's great that you're able to put out your own films where you can kind of flex muscles that you wanted to work on before and in specific new techniques.
It gives an opportunity to have something personal. Like I said, Alec was so personally involved in designing and creating these aliens, and it did give us the ability to help hone our image as Studio ADI, separate from Amalgamated, separate from ADI. Studio ADI being thing where it's a content generator. It's going to be ideas, and it's going to be all kinds of different material, short form stuff like on our YouTube channel, long form stuff like these low budget movies. But we really want the Studio ADI name to become a brand that people understand. It means it's going to be some very quality, high quality creature based character content in a variety of different at a variety of different levels.
So you are looking for more partners to turn to you guys and do practical driven films.
Yeah, listen, we want to make lower budgeted movies that have cool stuff that fans want to see.
Fangoria's doing movies now, more and more movies, and they are strictly practical. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw the last Puppet Master, Tate Steinsick.
No, I haven't seen it, but I saw that.
See it. It's all practical.
I hear it's great.
Yeah,
what is it, The Littlest Reich?
The Littlest Reich.
That is freaking hilarious. That is a great title.
It's the most insanely offensive horror movie you've ever seen.
Really?
It's spectacular. All the puppets are now Nazis that have been resurrected as
Can't
puppets.
Beat that. Yeah.
It's pretty insane. So then they all go attack minorities.
Oh!
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was good timing for this movie. It's pretty bold.
Exactly. Yeah, they're pretty bold, but they're doing almost strictly practically driven movies now.
All right, let's go, Tom.
Knock on Fangoria's door.
A real radio guy would have both of his feet moving.
Yeah, coconuts.
So few last quick questions. Were there any projects that fell through the cracks that were particularly painful, like ones that got away that you were working on that you're like, I wish that would have happened?
Yes. I remember Tremors 4 was hard when Tremors 4 went to K&B, not for any artistic reason other than we felt like, we're a family. We're part of the Tremors family. Wait, who's doing part 4? Because we just couldn't come up with the cost for them to part 4 and go into a series. And then part 5, I guess Kevin Bacon went back for Tremors 5.
Tremors 5 was the South African thing. The TV pilot was the only one Kevin went back for, and that only went to pilot.
Yeah, it only went to pilot. So
I don't know.
But again, it went to somebody else. So those are hard because you do make the mistake of thinking a family type contact in a business world is like a family type contact somewhere else. It's not the same. It can be as good as it can be, but it's never. There are no guarantees.
Right.
It was a big disappointment when Ridley Scott's I Am Legend folded, because we had done a lot of work on that, done test makeups for it. We're looking forward. We finally get to work with Sir Ridley.
Right.
And it was just, $10 million too expensive for Warner Brothers, apparently. And they didn't make it until years later, a decade later, with Francis Lawrence and all digital stuff.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a drag to miss out on that one. I don't know. There was a funny thing when the first Men in Black was happening, and we had credits. We had decent credits at the time, but we weren't like not as much as we have now. And we exited Amblin after just having had a great meeting. We're like, that was really cool. We opened the door, and there's Rick Baker. He's standing there. Oh, hey. And we're like, enjoy the show. We look forward to seeing Men in Black. We look forward to seeing your work, Mr. Baker.
The same thing. Same thing happened right when we were called in also to Amblin. I think to have a meeting for Galaxy Quest, which was a hilarious script, right? Which was a big great thing, and that was another thing where when we finished a meeting and we got a little further out of the building,
Right.
We were actually back in the parking lot, and we see Stan Winston drive in his Porsche. Again, the same kind of thing.
Shit.
I think that was a little more direct, where he said, Stan, do you want to do this movie? Yes, I'm going to. Yes, I'm going to do this movie.
Stan was funny. He's like, listen, guys, I love you. I will always refer work to you that I can't do, but I can do everything.
That's assuring.
He was good, though. He did point people our way, and he was a very good. He was a true mentor.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I was on your website recently, obviously, to research, and you have a pretty cool store. I that you have a lot of really, really, really cool props, so people should definitely check that out.
Yeah. The goal with that one was to create a line of art pieces. Really, they are not just collectibles; they are actual art pieces.
That swimming xenomorph was gorgeous. I got my eye on that.
And they're all from our production mold. So, like, normally you're used to getting a collectible that is either a recreated thing that looks like a pretty good replica of something but it's not manufactured and painted by the company that created it for the films. And in our case, actual artists that worked on these films, right? So that's what we wanted to do. Is it's our people creating them, and as a result, they're more expensive. So that's a tough thing, for people who are used to spending money on collectibles that are made in other countries by factories.
Right.
It's a tough thing. They want them. They love them. They see the difference in quality.
These are real deal collectibles. I mean, these are real collector's items,
and they're gorgeous. I mean, they are really. And Fox was very gracious. They gave us a great deal on, because we still had to buy the license to do it. But they're like, you guys. We actually had fans at Fox who want to see this succeed. So we have it. We have the license. We'll see. We still have to kind of figure out whether or not it's worth it to us, because it does cost you money to get into that game in terms of molds and production costs and all that, and whether or not it's exactly benefiting the artists enough, we're not really 100% sure of. But we're still doing it, and we get orders, so we're filling them.
Great. Well, we'll definitely provide a link in the show notes for sure.
Thank you very much. We appreciate
and people
that.
should follow you on your YouTube channel.
Studio ADI's channel on the YouTube. Tom's Instagram is
Tom_Woodruff Jr. You don't have to subscribe to me on Instagram, but going back for a moment to that YouTube channel, I understand we should subscribe.
Oh yes. If we didn't mention that, please subscribe, because we're promoting practical effects on that. And we want to start upgrading the quality of what we put out there and making more interesting stuff. So we need more subscribers like you.
Oh, Alec Gillis Instagram.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, Alec_Gillis. Yeah. This relates to our YouTube channel, actually. There's an interview. I did a fun interview with Kevin Yeager.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's a blast, right? And I learned that Kevin has more Instagram followers than I do, so I want to put that guy in his place. So get out there and subscribe. No, don't subscribe. Follow. Yes, subscribe. Oh, this is a mess, Tom. Help. What do I do? More peanuts.
You'll just re-edit this.
I think if you follow on Instagram and you subscribe on YouTube, I think that's what the
so
kids are doing
glad you're
nowadays.
here.
Yeah, I'm happy to help. Guys, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
great.
much.
Awesome
This is
for us,
really, really
too.
cool. Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. So overall, I feel like this interview does a really great job of illustrating the trials and tribulations of practical effects studios in this era of CGI. A fantastic book on the topic is Rubberhead by Steve Johnson. It's also loaded with some incredible pictures. Definitely check out Rubberhead if you can. But regardless of anything, the good fight is being fought for practical effects as more and more directors like Guillermo del Toro and J.J. Abrams are outspokenly utilizing practical effects for their major blockbuster movies and blending it with digital. Even James Wan opted to use as many practical makeup effects as he could for his CGI extravaganza Aquaman. The pendulum is swinging back towards practical, and I personally believe that the reason we're seeing so much rampant nostalgia for the 80s and 90s is because of practical effects. People miss having movies that had effects and characters that they could feel. Effects and characters that had that tangible gravity that their minds and hearts just believed. It's not just makeup effects, though. Explosions, car crashes, and other stunts and special effects are simply way more effective when they're done practically. Just look at Mad Max Fury Road. George Miller did the majority of those insane car sequences entirely practically, only dressing up a couple things here and there with digital. Anyhow, as always, here are some key takeaways from my conversation with Tom and Alec for aspiring practical effects makeup artists. Number one, provide options for the director. Alec spoke about the importance of presenting different design options to directors so that you can get into his or her head and instantly understand the look they're going for through trial and error. Alec recommends presenting a boring option, an option that is completely out of left field, and something in between. Number two, be a capitalist. Alec states that in creative endeavors, you need to understand business, probably more so than in non-creative endeavors. Artistic professions are extraordinarily difficult to make a living at and require not only ceaseless passion, but financial acuity as well. Alec states that if you're an artist, it's incumbent upon you to understand business, your products, your marketability, and how to get out there and network and promote yourself properly. This is huge. Number three, don't forget to do you. When Tom and Alec are recruiting other artists, they ask their applicants to show them not just what they worked on when they were working on big movies, but what they created on their own time. They want to see what kind of art matters most to their applicants because doing this enables them to really get a grasp on what their people are most passionate about. This is why it's critically important to constantly be improving your craft through your own personal side projects. It not only enables you to get valuable practice in, but it helps you further develop and arrive at your own personal aesthetic. And this is something that Steve Johnson talks about very extensively, is that some of the best practical effects artists had their very specific aesthetics, and directors would choose them based on those aesthetics. One of the problems right now with practical effects is a lot of the looks are getting homogenized. There's not as many practical effects artists who have their own signature aesthetic, and it's what used to make the industry great, and it's what the industry needs to start moving towards again. Anyway, having portfolios of personal projects is part of what shapes artists. Tom and Alec recommend building an extensive portfolio of your own personal projects because it showcases your own unique sensibility. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening. Don't forget to check out Tom and Alec's YouTube channel. It's pretty amazing, and it is just nothing but candy for practical effects fans. You can find it on YouTube at Studio ADI, and you can see their very cool store at studioadi.com. Thank you again for listening to the Nick Taylor Horror Show. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And don't forget to follow the show on the Instagrams at I am Nick Taylor. That's I am Nick Taylor. And if you really want to do me a huge solid, feel free to share this episode with your friends, family, and colleagues on the social media. I'm Nick Taylor, and thank you again for listening to the Nick Taylor Horror Show.